If you, like me, are an avid user of Apple devices, I have a question for you. Did you know that there are totally unnecessary features in macOS that turning off them will A. save your battery life, and B. increase your computer's performance? Even if you knew that already, keep watching because today I'll let you know which features must be turned off immediately. First, let's try to reduce our Mac's startup time. If you have been using a MacBook for a long time and have a bunch of apps installed, most likely your desktop looks like this when you start it. It doesn't, then you're one of the lucky ones. Still, I strongly recommend that you disable the automatic launch of programs when you log in. This is easily done by going to System Preferences, Users and Groups, Login Items. Here, on the right, you will need to remove unnecessary apps using the minus button, or if you have a very important app that has to be launched at system startup, you can check the Hide checkbox, which will launch it in the minimized mode. And yes, modern Apple computers load exceedingly fast, but why undermine it when you can make your Mac more efficient by running your apps the way you need? That's right, you shouldn't. We've already talked about Spotlight and the convenience of this feature in macOS in one of our videos, but if you still haven't brought yourself to use this search feature in macOS, we have some tips for you. To help you find what you're looking for as fast as possible, Spotlight indexes all data that appears on your computer's storage on an ongoing basis. In other words, you save an image to your downloads, Spotlight immediately registers this image in order to instantly give you the search result later. Spotlight is really handy as a search engine, but it's only used on a regular basis by those whose files are in a complete disarray on their MacBook or those who are used to using it. If you don't use Spotlight very often, then keep in mind that disabling indexing will reduce the load on the system. On one hand, it will increase the performance speed, on the other, this will also increase battery life, which is not the case for iMac or Mac Pro users. You can turn off indexing in the Terminal app by typing in this command. This should be completely safe, but regardless, if you later decide that you need file indexing, here is the command to enable it again. Just enter the command in Terminal and press Enter. Among other things, Spotlight can be completely restricted by limiting the search in macOS to look for context or PDF files. This is done in System Preferences, Spotlight, Search Results. Here you will need to uncheck the boxes next to the items that you don't need when searching for certain files. Have you ever heard of the macOS Time Machine? This is one extremely convenient way to permanently back up your Mac. If you first start your device on macOS, you will immediately be prompted to activate the backup, referring to the fact that it's extremely important that you can restore it at any time in case of software failures, which are fortunately usually far and in between on Apple computers. The problem is that it's absolutely pointless to constantly back up your computer. So if you turned on the Time Machine when you first activated your Mac, I would recommend you turn off the automatic backup. System Preferences, Time Machine, backup automatically. Moreover, if you're still afraid of losing data, you can enable copying only when your Mac is not in use. For example, at night. If you are a Mac user with a small amount of SSD memory, for example 250, and at the same time use iCloud Photo Sync, I strongly do not recommend enabling this feature. Download originals to this Mac on your Mac. Because with a probability of 99%, if the photo library exceeds 5,000 pictures, which happens quite often, there may be no space left at all. But don't worry. In the settings, you can select not download originals to this Mac, but optimize Mac storage, which will allow you to upload old photos or those that you have not opened for a long time. This feature can be safely called an alternative of download unused apps on iPhone, which works the same way but with applications. And in order to save storage, you can enable desktop sync via iCloud, so all files will be immediately uploaded to the cloud. So you will also have access to the desktop without using your Mac. For example, using files on your iPhone or iCloud.com. This is especially handy if you're using an iMac or Mac Mini. And continuing the topic of your Mac storage, the next point is not a feature to turn off, but nevertheless, it should not be neglected. The SSD on a Mac should always be at least 30 to 40% empty, which once again confirms the fact that Macs with 250 GB SSD should disappear from this planet. Otherwise, your system may experience some difficulty difficulties and even freeze, giving out a pink screen. About the same as the blue screen of death in Windows. I ran into this while having the M1 MacBook Pro with 250GB SSD. Initially, it was scary that the Mac died, but by Googling it, it was possible to find out that this was due to a filled up SSD. So keep it 30 to 40% empty and buy a minimum 512 SSD. If you watched our previous video about macOS bugs, you already know that not all system updates lead to a positive outcome. Sadly, various bugs and system flaws can appear as a result. In general, before updating, it's always better to read reviews of actual users, wait a little while for Apple to fix the exposed bugs, and then finally click the Update macOS button. All of this is done in the same place: System Preferences, Software Update. Moreover, if you click on Advanced on this page, you will see a number of checkboxes that I would also disable depending on the need. For example, download new updates when available means that your Mac will download an update in the background without asking, taken away from the speed of your internet for one, and this is not always necessary. Check for updates is also not the most necessary item, given that when a new OS is released, most users learn about this from word of mouth and you are unlikely to miss something important. I kept only one item checked on my Mac: install system data files and security updates. Security is everything, therefore it's better that no cracks or holes appear on my Mac, but instead disappear.
Next, let's get into privacy.
Unfortunately, not all software developers distribute their software with good intentions. Some track your keyboard patterns, others require access to a webcam, and some others may even ask for full access to your hard drive. For what? Most probably to sell your personal data. So, the first thing when installing new software, do not give access to everything that the app asks for. If you've installed a text editor app and for some reason it requires access to a webcam, you will be right to think, what the fuck? However, if you weren't paying close attention and approved all access, you can still revoke it in System Preferences, Security and Privacy, and Privacy. Yes, there are a lot of items listed on the left and we will unpack some of them, but before that, click on the lock icon and click the Touch ID button in order to be able to edit some settings. The first is Location Services. In theory, location can be turned off completely, which will certainly save battery consumption, but before that, see if you need to share the location with voice memos or Siri. And do you want to keep your location shared with the weather app? This is also not particularly necessary, given that we can type in a specific city for the weather in the widget. Next, pay attention to the Photos section. If there are suspicious inconsistencies in the apps to access settings, for example, if DaVinci Resolve asks for access, that's okay, but if there's an app not related to photos or media files, turn it off, out of harm's way. The same applies to input monitoring. Do you need your app to see what you're typing outside of just the app? Not really and not always. So here, similarly to the previous stages, we disable everything that, in your opinion, is not necessary. And finally, full disk access is all about providing access to the entire disk. Here, I advise you to be extremely careful because location and input keys are fine, but access to all files is an extremely dubious request. Now let's talk about performance. Apple computers are certainly professional devices that also allow you to monitor how much time you spend on whatever software. This feature is called screen time and I recommend turning it off. Why? Because it has long been proven that it has a large power consumption, at least on smartphones. And from my own experience, I can say that the measurement of the time occurs in some strange way. Most recently, I spent almost whole day editing videos, but screen time ended up showing only 3 hours in DaVinci Resolve. Okay, macOS, you really know how to make a guy feel unproductive. To avoid that and to save some battery charge, you can turn off screen time in System Preferences, Screen Time Options, and turn off. Yes, you won't be able to see how many notifications your laptop received or how many times you opened and closed it in a day, but if your job doesn't require it, there is absolutely no point in leaving it it on. But what does make sense is to turn off notifications for unnecessary apps. Yes, it may not affect the performance of your Mac in any way, but it will positively affect your productivity and focusing while working. System preferences, notifications, here you disable everything that you consider necessary. This way your attention will be focused on work and not on the next push notification from Apple Tips or Game Center. All recent Apple devices support Siri, and although it appears to be convenient, you don't need to write anything, just ask, but how often do you really use it? To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of my laptop constantly listening to me in the hopes of hearing the awakening "Hey Siri" someday. In addition, it consumes battery charge. This can be disabled by checking off "Listen to Hey Siri" in System Preferences, Siri. But I went even further and disable it altogether. Sorry Apple, but there are better virtual assistants than Siri. And since we're talking about our Mac's battery life, let's turn off unnecessary functions that don't help our battery charge in any way. For example, slightly dim the display while on battery power is a completely unnecessary feature that does not save battery power in any way. We can manually change the display brightness without needing an additional function for that. Next, low power mode, a mode that allows you to save battery power when running on battery power, is relevant only if you have a Mac with an Intel processor, which absolutely cannot be compared with the energy consumption of Apple's M1, M2 chips, and so on. If you think that turning off Bluetooth on your Mac could save charge, probably yes, but the difference is entirely insignificant, because newest Bluetooth modules are extremely energy efficient thanks to the Bluetooth Low Energy tech, which allows you to spend 1 to 3% of the battery charge on an iPhone and even less on a Mac. And now the most important thing, never, hear me? Absolutely never turn off Find My Mac or Find My iPhone. Yes, perhaps some people consider the always on location, constant interchange among Apple servers, etc. consumes battery, but no battery life is worth a lost or stolen device. Let your Mac run out of battery 10 minutes faster, but at least you'll always be able to track your device. If you happen to know other MacBook features or functions, be sure to share them in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, also go ahead and click on this one or this one, and see you in the next one.